Good evening and welcome, everyone. Welcome to this Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. And hello, Dee. We were wondering whether or not you would show up tonight, but we're glad to have you. And because tonight we were inspired to focus on what is clearly a huge dilemma, a huge problem that we face in this day and age. And that is, and this is beyond opinion, or it's obvious. We live in a time of confusion. This entire world is engulfed, is completely inundated and overwhelmed by the forces of confusion and chaos. It is absolutely impossible to find a clear answer out there about most subjects, most topics, and most goings on in the world. There are countless theories and counter theories and counter proposals, and no matter what rabbit hole you go down, you can keep digging and digging and digging, and you will find someone who has already gone down that rabbit hole before you and has produced some sort of unified theory or conclusion as to the nature of that rabbit hole, or the truth which they claim exists at the bottom of that rabbit hole. And one must ask oneself the obvious question: what's all this confusion about? And how is it that we are supposed to find any truth out there in the world? And what is particularly insidious is the fact that we live in a world which is clearly run by a dark cabal who are in control. And there are countless theories out there in the internet as to the nature of this dark cabal and their origins and their goals and their methods. And you have probably heard everything from the Bilderberg Group to the royal families to this particular cultural group or this particular race of people or that particular group. You've probably heard, about the Illuminati, about the Freemasons, and even reptilians and alien invaders and alien insurgency, and just it goes on and on and on and on and on. And of course, there's the theories about the shadow government in the United States, the dark, what do they call it? In any case, not the government that's elected, but the shadow government that's lurking in the background, and it just goes on and on. And it is very easy to get caught up in all of these conspiracies and in all of these theories about the secret cabal enslaving humanity and their plans for the future. Because even Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum and others in that forum have announced that the Great Reset is coming. And they actually have published plans called 2030, Plan 2030, which many people speculate will be the great banking reset, in which case all world debt will be wiped out or reset to zero or something to that effect. But they're also talking about these elites, how we will own nothing and that we will be happy, that somehow private ownership will be eradicated somewhere around that time. Then there's all the conspiracies around the Wuhan flu, for lack of a better expression. It's difficult to use the actual words in the video because then the video will be delisted, and this platform will take all sorts of retribution action against the video if we name the particular seasonal flu that's been going around, that's been causing all the mayhem and chaos in the world for the past 2 years. Then there's the jab, the more or less, perhaps not yet forced, but certainly coerced inoculations, which are consistently being pushed into the forefront, despite all of the protests against it. And so there's all sorts of theories around what that's all about, whether it's a gigantic eugenics program, that it's a culling, a mass culling of the human species by the elites. It goes on and on and on. There's no end to it. And again, it begs the question, why are we so inundated with all of this chaos and confusion and these competing conspiracies, or perhaps not competing, perhaps they're complementary conspiracies. Perhaps they all mesh together in some sort of beautiful fabric, some beautiful quilt of evil doing and enslavement of humanity, when really it requires literally thousands of hours of our time and endless energy to be able to unpack and attempt to get to the bottom of any one of these conspiracies, let alone the whole big picture, if you will, of the evil cabal out there in the world, and their many facets and their many arms, if you will, all the roots and all the branches. Like if we were in a Marvel movie and we were trying to unpack and get to the bottom of and get to the core governance structure of Hydra, for instance, to use a comic book analogy. But what if all of that was just a very, very cleverly designed distraction? What if the Black Lodge really isn't out there at all? And the reason why we're living in all of this confusion and all of this chaos is precisely to keep us focused out there, to keep our consciousness and our efforts and our energy focused on the world around us and the world outside of us, as if that were the source of all of our suffering, as if that were the source of all of our problems. And if our future and our immediate happiness, or our future happiness, some theoretical point of happiness down the road, was dependent upon us unraveling this spaghetti, this ball of twisted yarn, if we want to use a visualization, or if you've ever tried to untangle the cords behind your computer system, you know how cord management can be. Perhaps you've seen those pictures on the internet of network administrators and how it can just be this complete spaghetti chaos, and how difficult it can be to try to figure out which cable is connecting into which box. But then you step back and you think to yourself, well, wait a minute. What do we know about the nature of physical pleasure? What do we know about temptation? From our own personal experience, we've all had the experience of being tempted, being convinced by our mind, by our body, by our emotions, that there's something missing in our life, and that if we can only grab it, if we can only acquire that external thing, whatever that may be, then we will be happy. And we've all experienced that on some level, even the most mundane level, like you're at your computer working and you get a craving for chocolate. And if only I can get that chocolate bar. I need a chocolate bar. I need a pick-me-up. Or I need my Starbucks coffee or whatever. And then you go and acquire that thing, that external thing, and you consume it. And perhaps you have some sort of euphoric physiological, psychological, emotional response based entirely on chemistry. But shortly thereafter, you come off that, and once again, you're right back where you started. And if you have experienced this on a different level, on a larger scale, then perhaps it was buying the car that you wanted, or the piece of jewelry that you had your eye on, or some article of clothing that caught your eye in the boutique. It was on the mannequin, and you said, "Oh, if only I could have that and look like that." And then you acquire that piece of clothing, and then you take it home and you put it on, and you look at yourself in the mirror, and it's just, the luster just isn't there anymore. It didn't deliver on the promise. And we all know that this is the case. And one of the reasons why the elite have to keep accumulating stuff and accumulating things of ever greater value is because there's no lasting satisfaction in the accumulation of things. But if there is no lasting satisfaction and no lasting peace, joy, and happiness in the accumulation of things, or the experience of things, the external experience of sensory pleasures, and the fulfillment and the satiation, the momentary satiation of desires from the outside world, why would it be that our suffering is caused by elements in the outside world, and that our lasting peace, joy, and happiness comes from solving the dilemma or the problems of the outside world? If the outside world cannot deliver by virtue of pleasures, peace, joy, and happiness, how can the elimination of threats deliver lasting peace, joy, and happiness? It only delivers the illusion of peace, joy, and happiness insofar as the object of our fears has been eliminated, reduced. So someone who has a phobia of spiders, when confronted with a spider, will say, "Get it away, get it away, get it away, get it away." And so someone takes the spider away, takes the spider, catches it, puts it outside or whatever, then the person feels relief. But the underlying cause of the phobia of the spider was not in the spider. This is the great trick, the great insidious lie that the ego tells us, that the ego is so good at. You've heard the expression divide and conquer. You know that the forces of darkness in this world achieve their goals by dividing and conquering. But because once you divide a group, you can set them against one another. And when you set them against one another, you essentially play both sides. You really don't care who wins. You're playing both sides against each other. And if you're playing both sides, you can siphon off the energy or the money or the power or the influence by virtue of essentially whispering in the ear of both sides. So you play this game whereby you gain complete control by essentially taking the whole, splitting it apart, usually in two, because that seems to be the most effective. Like, for example, in the United States. and then setting these two sides against one another. And like a Grima worm tongue from Lord of the Rings, from the Two Towers, if you recognize that analogy, that character and that allegory, you can whisper in the ear of the king and you can cast a spell on him. And meanwhile, your spies are whispering in the ear of your king's opponent. And this way you are manipulating both sides and causing great suspicion and great dissent and moving them towards armed conflict. But the ego does something very, very similarly in our own mind. Our own mind, which is split in the dialectic. I want this, I don't want that. Or I want this, but I also want that. But I can only have one. Which one should I have? And anybody who has ever been in a situation where they were in a relationship and suddenly another individual showed up and you were tempted to have an affair with that other individual, you know what the mind and what the heart and what the desires of the body, you know how convincing they can be. And you know what kind of turmoil and what kind of anguish and what kind of suffering they can produce. Because you don't want to be unfaithful, but there's something inside of you that's pulling you in this other direction. And it's like you're being torn in two, you're being split apart. The main way in which the ego divides and conquers us is by giving us countless external stimuli to distract us with. See, our consciousness, no matter how much consciousness we have available to us, I'm just sort of trying to catch up on some of the chats. No matter how much consciousness we have available to us, there's a limit to how much we can focus and dedicate ourselves to any particular observation. And we know, or we should know, that we should go through life observing everything around us to the best of our ability and remaining present and mindful of what's taking place around us. But also, we should be focusing on what's taking place inside of us, how we are reacting to what is taking place around us, our mind, our heart, our body, and also from our higher self, from our innermost. How are we responding? How is the being sending us impulses to respond to what we are experiencing? Because we are receiving guidance and we are receiving information from our innermost being throughout our life. So the third eye, the capacity to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, is the capacity to be connected with our innermost. Who is the seer? Who is the one who delivers us the knowledge about what it is that we are seeing? That is where our powers come from. That is where our insights and intuition comes from. It all starts with the word in, imagination. It's inward. It comes from within into us. But if we are inundated from without and surrounded and saturated by distraction and by danger and by, in no uncertain terms, terror. It's like we're being terrorized around us. And we go on the internet and we're surrounded by, and we're bombarded by conspiracy theories. And all of the politicians are corrupt, and all the corporations are corrupt, and all the millionaires and billionaires are corrupt, and the global elite, and now they have this plan and that strategy and this ploy and that ploy. All of this drags us, our consciousness, which, let's face it, we only have a limited amount of consciousness available to us. The rest of it is bottled up inside of our ego. And insofar as that those egos are being stimulated, particularly egos of fear and lust, but also pride and also envy, because let's be honest with ourselves. One of the reasons why there is such great disdain for the 1%, the global elite, is pure envy. There's a great mass of people who'd like to have what they have. Simple as that. And they imagine themselves to behave differently if they were able to switch places with those individuals. And perhaps they would. But all of this saturation and inundation, all all those stories being played out on the world stage are there to keep us outside of ourselves and to prevent us from living one eye in and one eye out. And the reason why that is because the Black Lodge, despite what all the conspiracies and all the conspiracy theorists and whatnot will tell you, the Black Lodge is not out there. They're not. What we see in the world is only an expression, a reflection. What we see are individuals enslaved by the Black Lodge. So, for instance, we just briefly show you some examples. This is a video called The Nobility Wars.
Everywhere it says in the middle here.
It's 3 hours long. This is an individual who has dedicated his life to uncovering the global conspiracy of the ruling class, which here he's referring to the Order of the Garter. And what he's pointing out here is that in all of these crests, you will see the same symbols recurring over and over and over again, but particularly you will see this blue sash, this blue garter, which encases all of these coats of arms of all of these different royal families around the world. And he will trace the lineage of these royal families all the way back to the pharaonic despots of the later Egyptian period during the fall, and then the Romans and so on and so forth, and the Middle Ages and all the royal families of Europe, and then the Ottoman Empire and even to Japan, and all the royals and the emperors all over the world are actually part of the same cabal that has been ruling humanity for literally thousands of years. And sure enough, he may be right. Like, this may be accurate, and he may be right, and this may be a global conspiracy that deals with royal bloodlines that goes back thousands of years. Again, back to the degenerated fallen pharaohs of the later ages of Egypt during Egypt's collapse. Well, certainly after Egypt's golden age. Here he's talking about a castle in Europe, and he points out how it has the checkerboard in the courtyard like the Masons. There was another video, and just for your sake, if you're interested in watching this, there's no harm in watching this. I'll share the link with you. It's in the chat. It's 3 hours though. So, but rest assured, you can get to parts where he's scrolling through all the different coats of arms, and you can fast forward through those parts. You don't have to like sit through all of it. But there's another video which came to our attention in the last 48 hours, which we wanted to highlight, and it was this video talking about the that was made in 2009, already referring to what is now has been this COVID-19 conspiracy that's been playing out in the world. Of course, at that time they were talking about SARS, and this woman was claiming that that they would be there's a mass culling coming, and that they would be using vaccines to do so, and of course this was a program that was done by Jesse Ventura, who has one of these like conspiracy programs. And again, this program is now what, 13 years old? Well, no, 12 years old. And it goes into a fair amount of detail about this COVID stuff. Now, this is on BitChute. I don't think you can get this on YouTube, but again, we can, we have no problems sharing this information with you. But the reason why we're sharing this information with you is that there is a great deal of evidence and a great deal of effort that's being put into revealing the external threats to us and the conspiracy that is seeking to enslave and destroy humanity from without, from the outside. And whether or not there is genuine merit to these conspiracies, and whether or not, for example, the Wuhan flu inoculation is genuinely a substance which is causing death, that again is secondary. It's secondary because any initiate on the path isn't afraid of death. And in the Kali Yuga, and we are in the Kali Yuga, albeit the beginning of the Kali Yuga, we are still in the early stages of the Kali Yuga, despite what it may feel like. The Kali Yuga, the Black Lodge, is currently undermining and dismantling and deconstructing humanity on a metaphysical level. It's deconstructing history and tradition and culture and gender and religion, philosophy. All of these things are being deconstructed and dismantled and undermined. But we have not yet moved into the realm of physical destruction. But anybody on the path, anybody who's seeking to awaken and self-realize, they know that death is part of that path. But it's specifically death of the ego, death of the false self. And so this obsession with physical death and the physical harm, which may or may not be being caused to humanity by the so-called cabal and the World Health Organization and world leaders and the pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, should be secondary to the harm that the Black Lodge is causing us within. And if we are afraid of what is transpiring out in the world, remember that the fear of the spider isn't in the spider. The fear is in us. And if we are inundated with spiders and surrounded by spiders, it's because the Black Lodge is trying to rule us and possess us. But it's not the spiders which possess us. And it's not the spiders which rule us. It's our fear of the spiders which rule us. It's not the pornography which rules us. The internet, one of the first things that the internet, as soon as the internet was created and had any sort of open public forum, one of the first things which appeared and popped up on the internet was pornography. In fact, the only reason why YouTube exists is because the pornography industry innovated and developed video, digital video, and video compression to be able to deliver pornographic videos online and to be able to deliver live pornography over the internet. For the pornography industry, the internet was this absolute boon. It was a complete and total. But pornography doesn't possess anyone. It's only there to stimulate our lust. It's our own desire. It's our own lust which possesses us. And where is that lust but inside of us? All those advertisements, all those programs that were on television in the 80s and 90s, you may remember them. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Do you remember there was this TV personality called, what was his name? Oh, we can't remember his name. He used to have this program, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and he would go on this, he would show off, they would show off these wealthy people's, their mansions and their yachts and their private jets and their cars and all the rest of it. Robin Leach. Thank you, CCAT. Yes, Robin Leach. Robin Leach, and he had this crazy, I'm Robin Leach, and this is the lifestyles of the rich and famous. What was all that, if not to stimulate envy, desire, greed, the desire for those things, envy of those people who had those things, but also the ambition, the desire to acquire and accumulate such riches, such lavish lifestyle, such actually the word erotic from as it applies in the Greek means extravagant, means sensory pleasures over and above the necessities of life. That's what erotic means in the Platonic sense of the word. Now we know that eros is love, but erotic means the love of things and the love of pleasures. So we're talking about lust as it applies to the lust for money, the lust for sensory pleasure, and the lust just to the desire just to own stuff. And if you've seen any of those programs like Hoarders and whatnot, you know that there are people who accumulate stuff, and it's not particularly valuable stuff, but it's valuable to them somehow. It gives them a feeling of comfort and security. They're trying to fill some kind of a void inside of them by accumulating and accumulating, like a rodent accumulating stuffing for their den, right? To keep out the cold, harsh winter. But in human beings, we don't really have to, I mean, hoarders don't hoard things to keep themselves warm. What they're trying to keep out is the cold, harsh reality that they're empty inside. Everything around us is an indicator, is a mirror that is pointing back into our soul. This humanity, we were speaking a moment ago about the internet and how as soon as the internet was born, pornography leaped onto the internet, and the pornography industry innovated many aspects of the internet, including not just the video aspect and the compressed video, but also e-commerce. The first websites to accept credit cards and take credit card payments online, surprise, surprise, was the pornography industry. The internet is a macrocosmic reflection and expression of the subconscious mind of humanity. This is beyond dispute. This is not a theory. This is fact. And all you have to do is observe yourself and be honest with yourself and see what goes on the internet, and observe individuals, and then observe how individuals behave on the internet, where the typical social norms, or the social graces, if you will, of face-to-face communication are removed from the equation. Now, with anonymity and distance and the safety and security and the comfort of being in one's own home, wearing one's pajamas in bed on one's iPhone, one can tell whomever one wants to where to go. There's this strange thing, particularly on Facebook, where the F word is used constantly, incessantly. People posting memes saying, you know, about not giving a fuck. I don't give a fuck. And just and you know, please go fuck off. It's like this, just a post. It's just some sort of passive aggressive post that a person can make on Facebook expressing to the world. And it's strange because the only people who will see that post are your friends on Facebook. And it's a strange expression for everybody to go fuck themselves and that you don't give a fuck about them. You know, the interesting thing about jokes is that we laugh because they're funny, but we laugh because they're true. You would never, or perhaps we don't know you well enough, Dee, but we're guessing that you would never walk into a Starbucks and tell the person behind the counter, just, you know, when they ask you, you know, would you like a foam on your coffee? Would you like steamed milk in your coffee? And you would say, oh, I don't give a fuck. I don't think you would say that. Perhaps you feel it in your heart. Perhaps that's the thought that comes to your mind, but you certainly wouldn't express it that way. The internet, therefore, is this deep, dark, sort of cathartic sort of insight into the psyche of humanity. And if that's true, then what about these so-called conspiracies and these hidden cabals and their insidious plans, plots, and ploys to destroy humanity? If the internet is an expression of the subconscious mind of humanity, the conspiracies, the conspirators, they're also anonymous. They also operate with impunity. The world around us is always a reflection of our inner psyche. microcosm, macrocosm. If the only true reality is the one inside of us, and this three-dimensional, massively multiplayer online role-playing game is a projection of consciousness, and that consciousness is being filtered by the subjective reality as created by our egos and our personalities, then what we are observing all around us is on the matrix of a three-dimensional screen, a three-dimensional virtual reality that is projecting what is on the film stock of our own subconscious mind. Back in the 80s, when the Americans made the song for USA for Africa, all those American artists got together and they recorded this song, and the song was "We Are the World. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones to make a brighter day," etc., etc. This is obviously a very nice and sentimental song, and it raised a lot of money. Was it Band-Aid, or Band-Aid was the British one? CCAT. Band-Aid was "Do They Know It's Christmas," right? The song that I'm thinking of was "USA for Africa." It was the one that was produced by Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson and so on. The British had the "Do They Know It's Christmas Time at All," which is arguably a better song, but not relevant to the point that we're trying to make here. We are the world in microcosm. The world is us in macrocosm. So the sins of the world, the 1%, the elite, and everything that's taking place in the world, and all those conspiracy theories and everything, all that's all taking place inside of us. Inside of us, we all carry karma. We all have our egos. We all carry karma, and we also are entangled with the karma of this planet, which means we are entangled with the karma of previous humanities. And to one degree or another, our karma is entangled with every other person on the planet, including those global elite, including the global cabal. And this video, which we shared, this video, this woman speaks about the Bilderberg group, and how there's actually the Bilderberg group itself is also a front. It's also just a misdirection. It's all just a distraction. That there's actually a group of 7 men, according to this woman. And did we share this link? Yes, we did. This woman claims to have spoken to someone that told her that there are 7 men that actually make the decisions of the long-term direction for the planet, and that all these other groups and cabals and everything else are subordinate to their will, and that these 7 men, presumably the leaders of 7 major families, are involved in that. Now, it's possible, it's conceivable that those 7 men are actually black magicians or awakened demons. It's possible. But our feeling is that that's not the case. Because black magicians and awakened demons, that's not their way. Their way is, even though those 7 men are in secret and in hiding, nobody knows them, you don't see them, they're not on television. Nonetheless, our feeling is that the black magicians and the awakened demons are the ones around them and within them. working in the shadows, truly in the shadows of the subconscious mind. And they might come and they might express themselves in physical form, much like the White Lodge does. But the Black Lodge and the White Lodge are basically playing this chess game, and souls are pawns, if you will. The difference is the Black Lodge does not have to adhere or does not adhere to the law of free will in the same way that the White Lodge does. In fact, it doesn't adhere to the law of free will at all when you consider things like demonic possession. And when you are gripped by ego, when you are possessed by fear or possessed by anger. And that's why it's what's reflected in our penal system and in our judicial system is that there is murder, first-degree murder, but then there's second-degree murder. And then there's manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. So second-degree murder means you killed that person in the heat of passion. It wasn't premeditated. Just something came over you and you lashed out and you killed them. Involuntary manslaughter means you just punched the guy or hit the guy or broke a bottle over his head and you accidentally caused his death. What came over you was an act of violence, but you really did not intend any permanent injury to that person. You didn't want to kill them. You were just, in a fist fight or what have you, right? And so what gets reflected in our judicial system is that there's premeditated murder, meaning you wanted to kill them, you planned to kill them, you went out and you did the deed. And then there's these other lesser expressions of that. Now, whether or not that's appropriate in terms of karma, in terms of the great law, because the great law works on cause and effect, meaning it's the final result which matters. Intent actually has very little impact from the viewpoint of the great law of karma, which is trying to balance energies in the universe and positive and negative effects. So whether or not you intended to kill someone, from that standpoint, the fact is that they're dead, and the ramifications of that are the same, whether or not you intended to do it or didn't intend to do it. But this is a complex, almost philosophical question, which we could spend hours on just on its own. The point we're getting at is that the Black Lodge is acting first and foremost within us and within all of its pawns and all of its useful idiots and all of its slaves. And the more you see or uncover other human beings or other intellectual animals, other human beings, other people, the 1%, etc., behaving in ways which are deemed for lack of a better word, evil or insidious or selfish, egotistical, etc., etc., what you're really witnessing are individuals who are enslaved by the Black Lodge. And they're suffering. They're enslaved just as we are enslaved. The difference is that they have, somewhere along the line, they have sworn allegiance. And that allegiance, because the Black Lodge is clever and insidious, they've created all of these different, well, I mean, just look, right? All of these different crests and seals and families and dynasties and these individuals swear allegiance to these families and these bloodlines. It's like the mafia in another manifestation of this. So, but these crests and logos and coats of arms are proxies to allegiance to the Black Lodge itself, allegiance to ego itself, because ego operates on attachment and identification. So think about this, like when you think about coats of arms, a coat of arms, and even the word itself denotes this notion of this cloak, something that we wear over top of ourselves. And we can comprehend this from the standpoint of we all are here already wearing coats of arms. It's called our physical body. It's called our personality. This is just a persona. We are just a character, an avatar, so that we can be here in three-dimensional space, experiencing three-dimensional reality. Our true being, our higher self, is the player within. But if we become identified with this coat, with this armor, because arms is like armor. Arms means weapons, as in armaments, the weapons, but what gives us strength, right? And what gives us protection, what protects us from the world, from the attacks of others, but also what allows us to attack others, what gives us strength and force in the world, in the conflict, right? Those are our armaments. And a coat is what you wear. So you wear these armaments. This is your strength. But these are external to you. Your armaments are external to you. They're not talking about your physical arms here. They're talking about weapons, the shield, the sword, the mace, the axe, the spear. And then the coat that you wear is like the armor that you wear. So with that symbological metaphor, your bloodline, your family is equated to these armaments, to this armor. So you become your name. So it's not only that you've now identified with this body and this mind and this personality, but now we're going to give you a name, and it's your surname. And in the past, there was always a so if you were for example, they would say Jesus of Nazareth, right? So of Nazareth, but of course that was a surname which that denotes or suggests a surname which relates to where you are from. But later, the surname would refer to the name of your family. So there would be this family name. And so even in German, the word is von, right? So something von Bismarck, right? And we actually, so all the aristocracy always had or in French, it was de. So it was Prince de Léon, right? So it's always of something. So you are of something. That shift, right? So instead of identifying with your innermost being and knowing the name of your innermost being, the clever shift that the Black Lodge does is it creates an external entity and makes us identify with that external entity and pledge allegiance to that external entity. Now, of course, the aristocracy, the ruling elite, they have their coats of arms and their family name, which they have their members and their minions pledge allegiance to and identify with. But they recognize, the Black Lodge recognizes the power of this, the power of using these symbols and emblems to hypnotize and control and manipulate those individuals, the aristocracy. So what do? They do much the same thing for nations and nation states. We call them flags, and we call them national anthems. And what do? Every American child, maybe perhaps not anymore, but they used to pledge allegiance to the flag. And they have essentially a prayer. It's a secular prayer, but it's a nationalistic prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of my fathers, and so on and so forth. And they are pledging themselves to something outside of themselves, some collective, some point of identification, so that it's always out there. It's always out there. And it's some sort of bigger, grandiose something or other, which the Black Lodge is always getting us to focus on, and always getting us to create emotional and mental and physical attachments to. And the Black Lodge is so good at this, they employ sacred symbols and sacred symbology. So, for example, they will use the cross. They will use the compass and square. They will use the pyramid. They will use the swastika. There is nothing. They will use the lion. I mean, just look at all the lions and unicorns, to the point where the individual who made this video believes that all of that symbology is evil, simply because it's used by evil. But the thing is, symbols are symbols. They symbolize what they symbolize. And insofar as the cross and many other symbols symbolize power, but true power, definitive power, actual force, the force of light in the universe, strength, the Black Lodge takes those symbols and applies them externally to external phenomena and infernal phenomena. So phenomena which relate to the infernal worlds, not the supernal worlds. But again, because the Black Lodge recognizes that you can coat phenomenon, you can put a fresh coat of paint, you can put a coat of spirituality on something quite insidious, but you can make of it this illustrious, glorified, resplendent phenomena, and people will bow down and worship it. This is the nature of idolatry. This is how religions and genuine mysticism and all mystery schools degenerate into dogmatic religions and then eventually into idolatry, because the outward symbols at the beginning, the followers of that tradition recognize those outward symbols as symbols, and the symbols are a reminder to awaken their consciousness, remember themselves, and to focus on the force and the strength and the light within themselves. That's what the symbol is there for. A symbol is a signpost, and that signpost points back to ourselves, points back to the light, points back to the true nature of reality, reminds us symbols and sacred symbols in particular, and allegories and myth and high art, music, sacred music, choral music, the music that uplifts the heart, uplifts the soul, beauty, true beauty, nature, the true beauty of nature, not the aesthetic beauty. Oh, look how beautiful that flower is, but the beauty of nature where even a cockroach is beautiful because it was divinely designed. It was divinely inspired. And the way it moves and the way it flies and the way it does this and the way it does that. And you can be moved to tears. That's beauty. We often use this quote by John Keats, the final couplet on Ode of a Grecian Urn. Beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. That is all you can know in life, and that's all you need to know. Beauty and truth. The Black Lodge sells us aesthetic beauty and lies. And that's a fact. Everything has its purpose under the sun, though, including cockroaches, as CCAT points out here. Without them, we would have rubbish miles high on the planet. The Black Lodge also has its purpose. And that purpose is precisely to tempt and twist and corrupt all that is truly beautiful. Truly beautiful. The two words are synonymous. They are the same. They are one and the same. So they are here to twist, tempt, and corrupt us and make us fall. That's their purpose. They are to us on the path as gravity and wind is to the tightrope walker. And the reason why the Black Lodge uses divide and conquer, and why we are inundated and surrounded by all this darkness and all this confusion and all of these apparent threats from outside, is because the tightrope walker must walk with single pointed concentration on their path, aware of their surroundings, but without any fear of the forces that are trying to get them to fall from that wire. And we can fall on either side of that wire. This is what is perhaps not always appreciated to those walking the path, and certainly those in the New Age have been entirely misled, because they believe that ascension is natural and ascension is coming to the whole world, and that this world is on the verge of a massive global awakening. But whether you contemplate the process of climbing a mountain or walking a tightrope or becoming a master pianist or achieving anything in life, fulfilling your life's purpose, you know that the obstacles standing in your way and the obstacles within you trying to prevent you from getting across that tightrope to the other side are numerous. And just at our level, and it's always this way, it is far easier to fall than it is to climb. It just is. The balance in the universe, there is this universe, the great law of karma is constantly balancing. The yin and yang is in motion. The Tao is in motion. And like a lava lamp, it's always out of balance, seeking that perfect balance. It's seeking that resolution, that balance. But it can't be that perfect balance. If it was that perfect balance, there would be no movement, there would be no motion, there would be no reality. Everything would collapse in on itself. Things are thrown out of balance, and it's in the balancing that mastery is achieved. Like the tightrope walker. If the tightrope walker had perfect balance, he could just walk across that line and that would be it. It would be easy. He has perfect balance. There would be no challenge. But it's the vibration, it's the wind, it's the height, it's the crowds, it's the pressure, it's all the rest of it, which create the challenge, which create the circumstances, which are trying to make him lose his balance, and he's constantly has to readjust his balance to stay on the path. And make no mistake, the path of the razor's edge is narrower and tighter than the tightrope walkers. And it's that way for a reason. Because that's a challenge. It's difficult. It's challenging. And what is it inside of us that causes us to lose balance? That causes us to be divided and conquered and fall this way or that way? It's the Black Lodge. It's our own egos. And we only can know this by observing ourselves. We can only know this by having one eye in and one eye out. We can only know this by watching how these psychological aggregates, these egos, fear, anger, envy, greed, lust, gluttony, pride, bubble up inside of us in reaction to the people and the circumstances around us. And we observe that. We observe how we get gripped by these egos and how they possess us in the moment and get us to behave in ways that perhaps afterwards we think to ourselves, wow, what possessed me to do that? You'll hear that often, mostly from people who are asleep. What possessed me to do that? We don't ever want to ask ourselves that question. We want to know the answer to that question at all times. What is possessing me right now, here and now, in this moment? No one else can do this for us. No one else can do this work for us. And no master and no angel and whatever can give us that information. No, nothing outside of us can give us that information. Only our own innermost guru can give us that information, but only if we remain conscious and aware and pointing our consciousness, at least a portion of it, inside of ourselves, in our mental center, our emotional center, and our motor, physical, sexual center, our body, mind, heart, and body, our three brains. But the Black Lodge is clever. They're really, really, really good at this game. And as far as this humanity is concerned and this planet is concerned, they have been winning this game over and over and over and over again. Humanities keep falling. The Black Lodge keeps defeating the White Lodge on this planet. This planet's karma is deep. It runs deep. And humanities and this humanity has committed many, many, many crimes against the planet, against one another, against God. And so we keep digging the hole deeper for ourselves. And the Black Lodge is so clever and so skilled at playing this humanity like a fiddle. So it creates this confusion, this storm around us. And it keeps us focused out there, especially now in the Kali Yuga, where you have a million different reasons to be worried and concerned and focused on who or what is screwing you, how, where, and when. And all the different ways that you are under threat and that your way of life is under threat, and your possessions and your future and your children, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all outside and it's all around you. And you're constantly being provoked to take action out there in the world somehow. The Black Lodge doesn't care if you protest, the jab, or you protest this or that or the other thing. It doesn't care. Some members of the Cabal might care, but the Black Lodge itself doesn't care. It wins. It wins so long as you remain hypnotized and distracted and consumed and obsessed with their pantomime, with all their tricks and tactics for keeping you distracted and preventing you from remaining centered and keeping one eye pointed in at yourself and remembering your divine mother, remembering your innermost being, and watching, mindful, your mind, your heart, your body. What are my thoughts? What are my emotions? What are my sensations? And those sensations, by the way, include fourth dimensional sensations, the vibes that you pick up, right? What you feel. There's what you feel emotionally, and then there's what you feel energetically. And if you're an empath or you're particularly sensitive to energies, you will pick up many vibes around you. Sometimes you'll go into a room and you'll just get the, to use a technical esoteric term, you'll get the heebie-jeebies. And you'll just feel all wrong. The energy in the space is all wrong. You can feel that, you can pick that up. But that's fourth dimensional energy, right? That's, even if someone can be attacking you on the mental plane. You can be a black magician can attack you on the mental plane, on the emotional plane, on the energetic plane. So, but being attacked on the mental plane will result in a mental agitation. Then there's, what emotional agitation is. You felt that. You know what mental agitation is. And you also know what energetic agitation is when you feel that in your body. I mean, we've all experienced that one way or another. Even if it's as simple as the hair rising on the back of your neck, or you're getting goose flesh, and pins and needles, and these sorts of things where you encounter a circumstance or situation or something, and then you feel the energy going up and down your spine or through your body, rushing through your body. You're having a visceral 4D energetic response to energies that are flowing. And then, of course, there's physical sensations themselves. And some of what we're describing, you can say, well, those are physical sensations, but remember that the foundation of three-dimensional reality is 4D energy. We are all energy. So we might feel and experience like pins and needles in the body, but that experience is chi, is prana that we are experiencing. And then we're feeling that expressed through our nervous system, through the various physiological responses. But the Black Lodge doesn't want us to focus on any of that. The Black Lodge wants us to stay focused out there, out there, out there, so that it can manipulate and can manipulate us from within without our knowledge, so that we identify with and we believe the reactions which automatically come up when confronted by whatever circumstance. So you will, for example, often hear people justify anger and by using the passage from the Bible where Jesus chased the moneylenders out of the temple. And they say, well, look, it was a rare event, but Jesus got violent. Jesus got angry. And there's such a thing as righteous anger, they call it. Righteous anger. Anyone who has ever studied martial arts knows that it depends on which martial arts school you went to, because certainly there are schools of martial art which encourage you to get angry and which encourage you to channel your anger. But a true martial artist never gets angry. A true martial artist knows that they are most effective when they are calm and at peace. They may be able to harness and focus chi, prana, and they can do that using various different techniques, including vocalizations. But that doesn't mean they're angry. That doesn't mean they've lost their temper. There's a great scene from the film Highlander where Ramirez, played by Sean Connery, is teaching Connor McLeod, swordsmanship, and he's teaching Connor how to sword fight. And he says, never overextend your thrust. It leaves you vulnerable and off balance. And he says, never lose your temper. If your head is separated from your body, it's over. In other words, if they cut off your head. And that's what happens when you lose your temper. You're no longer in control. You no longer have control over your faculties. You're possessed by anger. Something has gripped you, and the likelihood that you will end up doing something which you will regret later is very, very high. Now, you might be able to get an incredible surge of strength, but that's all the more reason why you shouldn't allow yourself to fall into anger, because that super strength, which you can gain access to, is very often precisely what results in an end result which you regret later. This is the lesson that Star Wars tried to teach us, that Yoda tried to teach to Luke, and what we see on the dark side of the Force. The Sith encourage their followers to use anger and to channel their anger and give in to their anger, give in to their hate, because the anger and hate will make you powerful. They will make you powerful, but the cost is your soul. The cost is you will become a slave of the dark side. You will become a slave of your shadow self. You will become a slave of anger. You will become a slave of hate. You will become addicted to the power, and you will become attached and identified with the self that feels powerful through anger, through hate, or through lust, or through pride. Remember, the Black Lodge, if you go all the way back to the book of Genesis and the tempting serpent. So if we dial it back, what is the tempting serpent? The serpent is the symbol for the Kundalini, the sexual force. So how is it a tempting serpent? Well, we all know that lust, desire, how tempting it is. We all know how tempting lust is. We've all experienced that. And we all know how tempting it is, how lust tempts us to spill the sexual force, to spend it, to waste it through the orgasm. That's the tempting serpent. And there are aspects of the orgasm which are, the orgasm traditionally was referred to as the little death. The little death. The mental, emotional, physiological, and energetic rewards of the orgasm are specifically designed to be supremely tempting and hypnotic, because they are, in many ways, they mimic spiritual experience. They mimic revelation. They mimic ego death. They mimic physical death. They mimic the force and strength of illumination and enlightenment. Sexual potency for men particularly is, the sexual drive and sexual potency is to a man a shadowy reflection of the force and the power that is available to us when we are one with our innermost being, and when we achieve those higher levels of self-actualization. Sexual potency, the sexual conquest, for example, having many, many, many women or many, many, many children, is this inverse of self-actualization of the being, of the soul, by expressing and creating, by spilling like an animal, having lots of sex like an animal, having many concubines, having a harem, and possibly even children from all of those concubines, gives a man, but his ego, through his ego, he feels powerful, he feels accomplished, he feels the master of his domain, to use a crude expression from the episode of Seinfeld in which they were spoofing masturbation and refraining from masturbation. They were referring to everybody as whether or not they were still masters of their domain. So that's a ironic twist in that particular episode of Seinfeld. But what we're trying to get at here is the Black Lodge does not come to us empty-handed. The Black Lodge temptation is insidious. It is clever. It is subtle. It is like the criminal who is going to lure children into their van using candy or using toys or using a puppy or a kitten. It is a ploy. It is a lure, like when you go fishing with a lure. it is not something to be taken lightly, and it is this lure is what we need to focus on and always be leery of within ourselves. What is the nature of this lure? What is the nature of this desire that I have right now in this moment? What is dangling this thing in front of me? Why is this being dangled in front of me? We're going to take a little, go on a little side journey here, because Ryu asked a question, just reminded me of a question for you. Why did Darth Vader try to kill his son? Do we think Darth Vader would have killed his son if he could have succeeded? Do we think Darth Vader was trying to teach Anakin a lesson out of love in his heart somewhere? If so, what was the lesson he was trying to show Luke about the dark side? At no time does Darth Vader ever try to kill his son. Darth Vader's son is Luke Skywalker. And at no time does he ever try to kill Luke Skywalker. He cuts off Luke's hand. But remember, Darth Vader is mostly machine by that point anyway. So he just disarms Luke. And he believes that by defeating him, he can that Luke will, out of fear and out of terror and the loss of his hand, that he will give in, to the dark side and give in to his. But remember, at that moment, Darth Vader tempts Luke. He makes Luke an offer. Even though he's cut off Luke's hand, he says, look, you do not realize your importance. The Emperor, you have the power to defeat the Emperor. The Emperor has foreseen this. So come with me, and together we will defeat the Emperor. We will end this conflict, and together we will rule the galaxy as father and son. That's the offer that Darth Vader makes to Luke Skywalker, his son. He doesn't want to kill Luke. He never wanted to kill Luke. As for the question about Darth Vader teaching Anakin's lesson, you have to appreciate that at that point, Anakin is gone. Anakin is dead. Anakin is so far in the background that it's entirely Darth Vader. It's entirely ego that's driving him forward. The connection that he feels to Luke Skywalker, his son, does come from deep down the Anakin Skywalker within him, but is being filtered through all of that dark side, all the machinery, all the mask and the cape and everything else. So in other words, the feelings that Darth Vader have for Luke and wanting to be rejoined as a family is, come and join me and we'll rule the galaxy together. So it's not, oh, come with me, I'll take off my armor and my cape and we'll go to Dagobah, or we'll go back to I'll quit the Empire and we'll go be together as father and son and we'll go fishing. No, he doesn't say that. He says, no, let's defeat the Emperor and let's you and I rule the galaxy together as father and son. Let's create a new dynasty. Let's create a new dynastic family. It's, so this, it's a twisted connection. It is Luke who teaches Vader the lesson, right? And the lesson that Luke teaches Vader is compassion, and through his own sacrifice. Luke is willing to sacrifice himself, and that happens in the next film, in Return of the Jedi. Star Wars is entirely underappreciated. Star Wars is a modern mythology. It is a mythology for our time. And it's a reason why we did a 2.5 hour long video about which we entitled the Skywalker Apocalypse, for the very reason that Star Wars is, for our time, every bit as meaningful and important as any mythology from any point in history. Same with The Lord of the Rings. Same with the Matrix trilogy, which has been, again, twisted and corrupted by the Black Lodge to mean something else. People think that because they're conspiracy theorists, that they're awake and that they're no longer in the Matrix because they believe the conspiracy theory. This is how clever and subtle the Black Lodge is. So let's return back to the topic of tonight. And by the way, you may have noticed that we chose as our background for today's topic Babylon. That's the Tower of Babel behind us. And we're just living the same old story out again. We're watching the collapse of the global financial system, the global cultural system, democratic systems, governance systems. They're all starting to go. And the chaos and the confusion which unfolds out of all that is, again, what we began speaking about. But the challenge, we're gonna keep putting this back up here. The challenge is to be in the eye of the storm, to recognize that all that chaos and all that corruption and all that confusion around us, what Shakespeare called the hurly-burly, it's King Lear on the heath. Are we going to be like King Lear and lose our mind and fall into madness? Or are we going to remain calm and centered? And in the face of death itself, be like Luke Skywalker, lay down our lightsaber and say, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. I won't turn to the dark side. I won't give in to fear. I won't give in to anger. I won't give in to hate. But you see all those conspiracies and all those groups and all that stuff about the elites and how they want to do this and how they want to do that. You see how it's all designed to work us up into fear and anger and hate and envy and all these other emotions. Because that is how the Black Lodge wins. Because they are the Black Lodge. Fear, anger, lust, greed, hate, envy, gluttony, pride, shame, which is just the flip side of pride. All of these egos are far, far more complex and complicated than what they appear on the surface. So if the world around us is going to hell, are we going to go to hell right along with it? If we allow our egos to react in a typical, automatic, primal animal way, then yes, we'll go to hell right along with the planet, right along with the rest of humanity. Everyone who's asleep, everyone who's identified with their fear, their anger, their lust, their greed, their envy, their gluttony, their pride, their shame, their narcissism, identified with their nationality, their race, their gender identification, their political groups, and on and on and on and on it goes. Their coats of arms, the coats of arms that have been created for this humanity by the Black Lodge. But these coats of arms are mental, emotional, sensational, inside of us. Just as those coats of arms were created for the ruling elite and the ruling class, so the Black Lodge could control and manipulate them. And so they could create this dichotomy and this divide and conquer scenario where we have the ruling elite and then everybody else, and then the Black Lodge pits the two against one another, so that out of fear, they're constantly at each other's throats and suspicious of each other, because there's nothing the ruling elite fear more than the masses. And there's nothing the masses hate more than the ruling elite. It's always been the same. the nobility and the peasantry in medieval times. You had the Caesars and everyone else, and then we had this massive middle class, and you had slaves and everything else in the past. It's always been these class systems. It's always been a caste system, and each level, each caste, each class is pitted against one another, and the Black Lodge takes it all. Because as soon as someone identifies with their class, with their caste, the Black Lodge wins. As soon as you identify as a Republican or a conservative, and somebody comes along and says, look what that, if you consider yourself a liberal, and someone comes along and says, look at those conservatives, look what they're doing, they're trying to take away your freedom, they're trying to do this to you, that to you, that. All of a sudden you feel, oh my God, I have to hate that conservative. Why? Because I'm a liberal. The Black Lodge wins. Where's the compassion? Where's the love? Where's the seeking common ground? Where's any of that? No, we're surrounded. What this chaos and confusion is creating is more and more division, more and more extremism, more and more tribalism. This is how the Black Lodge wins. Divide and conquer. And the further we are apart, the greater ground we have to make up to reunite and realize we are all one. We are all one. But we can't realize that. And knowing that is not enough. Believing it is not enough. It might be a first step. But unfortunately, the Black Lodge is too clever and too insidious and too subtle and too good at what it does. All those New Agers think that we're all one already, and we're all one, and we're all gods, and we're all one with God already, so it's all good. All we have to do is take our mushrooms, smoke our pot, have our crystals, do our Reiki, maybe do some mantras, maybe do some meditation. Oh, but what we do some affirmations. All you have to do is, I am God, I am unlimited abundance, I am this, I am that, I am. And they believe that they can actually manifest themselves into God just by doing affirmations. They don't realize it's a trick of the ego. It's a trick of the Black Lodge. I am blank is identification. Because A, you don't know what God is. You don't know what abundance is. It's just a word. Abundance doesn't exist in a universe which is an illusion. There is no abundance. Abundance of what? And why do you want abundance? What abundance do you need? What yogi or ascetic or Buddha or master ever preached abundance, ever taught abundance? What genuine master ever said, now you know what you really need is abundance in your life? Abundance of what? It's a lie. It's a clever, subtle, tempting. Oh boy, is it ever tempting. And boy, does it sound good. Abundance, and everybody will live in abundance. And oh my God, it'll be manna from heaven. And we'll all be showered with gold and flower petals and but again, it's all like from this outside in stuff. Outside in, outside. But it's like, no. You can manifest your abundance. You manifest your abundance. It's all about manifesting your desire and manifesting your abundance and manifesting the world that you want to create. Manifesting, in that sense, manifesting your desires is black magic. Again, it's what you want to see in the world, and you're going to make it happen by force of will, by spending your sexual force, your sexual energy, to make it happen. You're going to manifest that in reality without any regard to the great law of karma, the great law of cause and effect, and what needs to happen, what needs to take place. But without any reference whatsoever to the natural unfolding of reality. and it's in complete and total ignorance of the fact that this planet is a living being. There's a good point. Manifesting is not from the Divine Mother. Well, actually, the way they teach manifesting, to spend your sexual force in order to create, it is the Divine Mother, but it's not the Divine Mother, the Virgin. It's the whore of Babylon. That's the point. You turn your Divine Mother into a whore. You whore out your Divine Mother to get what you want. You can do it. It's called black magic. You can get what you want. In the same way that if you go and hire a prostitute and have sex with a prostitute, you can get what you want. You can get sexual gratification. Or you can whore out your Divine Mother and get some sort of material thing. You can manifest a Porsche if that's what you want. All you got to do is whore out your Divine Mother. All you got to do is spill the sexual force. You're just spilling it in a different way. In the same way that you can whore out your Divine Mother in 1,000 different ways. Because the Black Lodge has given us all those different ways for us to do that. And say that we're being spiritual while we're doing it. Like all of those schools of Black Tantra, which tell you that the orgasm is spiritual. That the orgasm brings us closer to God and so on and so on. That's why it's called the little death. They give it these names in order to confuse us. And again, this brings us right back to the topic of the talk, to the topic of the live stream, the land of confusion. Let's look at the word itself. Confusion. Confusion. If yoga comes from the Sanskrit yug, which means to bind together, and religare is the Latin root word for religion, which also means to bind together, as in the ties that bind, as in wedding bands, the union, the sacred union of self and higher self, and self and the logos, self and God, the union, to bind together as one. That is fusion, to fuse together. That, by the way, is alchemy. To fuse together two metals alchemically is fusion, alchemy, right? Confusion is the opposite of fusion. Confusion is to split apart. Confusion is to divide and conquer. It is there in the word itself. Words have power and words have meaning. And there is in the word itself, confusion is to divide and conquer, to split apart. CCAT said, I had no idea manifestation was black magic. Good to know. Makes sense. Maybe just trusting Mother will provide instead of trying to force her to. We have a video on manifesting your desires, which talks about this topic, and it's this one right here, the truth about manifesting your desires. And we will share and copy, and there it's in the chat. But you make a good point, how if our Divine Mother provides us with all we need in our life, what do we need to worry about manifesting? Now, there is something that we can do on the manifesting side. We can pray and we can use our conscious imagination and put our heart and our energy and our passion and our love into healing the planet, into healing humanity. There is, in a general way, for example, there is, if you closed your eyes and visualized the planet and you prayed to your innermost being, your divine mother, you prayed to the Logos, to the Christ, you prayed to the Masters of the White Lodge to send forth a ray of golden blue resplendent light from your heart, engulfing and surrounding the whole planet with healing energies and loving energies to heal any karma and alleviate the suffering of all beings. This is perfectly acceptable. But anytime you do any type of practice like this, you always want to say in accordance with the law, so that what you are doing is aligning yourself and adding yourself consciously into all the rays that are actively affecting and attempting to heal this planet and reverse it from its current course, which has been that it's a fallen planet and a fallen humanity. We're trying to uplift the planet, which is in quite a bit of suffering. It's in quite a bit of deep into hell. This is not strictly speaking manifesting, because you're not trying to like manifest a new car or manifest a lot of money. But what you are doing is you're expressing your love and your compassion for humanity and for the planet and for all beings. And that is well and good, because again, that's aligning you with the nature of the Christ itself, the nature of the Logos, which is love. And expressing love and feeling love and visualizing love is perfectly acceptable, because that's the nature of the Kundalini, to raise it up and to sacrifice our energies for the sake of others and for the sake of the end of suffering of all beings. That is the work of the innermost Christ. So if you perform that type of meditation, that type of visualization, that type of manifestation, what you're really manifesting is love, then there is no, that's not black magic, right? You hopefully you can see the difference, right, between spending your energy for something for selfish gain and exerting your energy for the sake of the end of suffering of all beings. You can hopefully see the difference. Now, that's not to say that if you did this on an individual basis, that suddenly it becomes okay. Because there are black magicians, for example, and chaos magicians who can perform miracles of healing. They can heal people. But they never ask permission to do so. They just go right ahead and heal the person. Well, what if that person needed to be sick? What if that person needed to die of that illness? What if that was that person's karma? What if that was that person's destiny? And what if through the process of that illness, that person was fulfilling some great sacrifice for those around them, their family members, their loved ones? What if there was somebody close to that person who was going to achieve some kind of incredible growth or awakening through the relationship of that with that sick and ill person? Now someone comes along and heals that person. Now what? That person never has that awakening. And now the whole karmic process, which is intelligently managed, by the way, by Lord Anubis and the Lords of Karma. It's a it's an MMORPG, but it's more like D&D with a dungeon master, right? Who's actually creating the scenarios, and our Divine Mother is arranging everything that we need for us to be able to grow and develop. If somebody comes along and decides, oh, I don't want that person to be sick, or oh, I feel bad for that person, I'm going to heal them, and just heals them without asking for permission, they throw a whole monkey wrench into the works. Roy says, the manifestation I mean is the New Age concept. It's very rampant at this very moment of our time. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And hopefully we are explaining why it's a problematic. On the same topic of manifestation, Ryu says, Sat, I'm going to mispronounce this, Sat Gurunath talks about when he first got the Sita power to manifest gold from the ether, he made a gold bar for someone. And in doing that, he realized it was in deviation from the true path. So this brings us to the notion here that we come back to the beginning. The activity in the world, this heightened activity of confusion. And as we explained, confusion means to separate, to tear apart, to divide and conquer. And you notice that confusion, the effect that it is happening on the world. Don't worry, D. Don't worry, D. It's going to be on YouTube in perpetuity. You can go back and watch any of the parts that you missed later. As we explained, confusion is the opposite of fusion, confusion. And contrary, but also con. We also like con because like con artist, a con man. Confusion is precisely that which cons us and it keeps us locked in our mind, right? If we are able to have heart mind and able to connect to with our consciousness and in our heart, we can achieve gnosis, and then we can start to escape this cloud of confusion and get to the facts. But this confusion then is there to separate us. And the effect of the confusion in the world is this extremism, this tribalism. These people are organizing themselves into camps and into groups and into opposing teams, if you will, but tribes. It is this humanity is confusion sets humanity down the path of devolution, tribalism, animal, primal fear, suspicion, and anger and hate. All the things that we talked about in that the Emperor wants Luke to do in order to fall to the dark side. Because this is what the Black Lodge thrives on. It's what ego thrives on. Conflict, confusion, chaos. The ego feeds off of humanity. And this is how the ego truly feeds off of humanity. The people talk about pedophile rings and people who are siphoning off the energy of innocence and all of that stuff. All of that takes place out there in the world is just a reflection, a shadowy expression and reflection of what's really taking place inside each and every one of us. Every time we give in to our egos, every time we indulge those desires, every time we indulge our fear and anger and hate and greed, we are being siphoned off. Our sexual force and our consciousness is becoming more and more enslaved inside, bottled up inside of those egos, enslaved to those egos. We, through attachment, through identification, through indulging. So what's the remedy? Well, it's interesting that just today, D, who's in the chat, sent us. She did a reading, a tarot reading, and the two cards at the very top, one was Satan, and the other one was the Chariot. And she asked me. She said, what are my thoughts on? She showed me the other cards too. She says, what are my thoughts on this? I said, well, why don't you go to glorian.org and look up the cards on glorian.org and see what they have to say about these cards, and you can divine your own significance. And she did this reading again. She came up with Satan and the Chariot. Now, Satan is our own individual shaitan. It's a Hebrew word, and it means adversary. And it literally describes the psychological aggregates or egos of our psyche, which are crystallized in what is known as the Kunda buffer organ, or the fallen Kundalini, the tail of Satan, if you will. The Kunda buffer organ exists in the supernal worlds. Well, infernal worlds. It's part of our lunar bodies. It's a aspect of our lunar bodies because it's the fallen Kundalini. Every time that we indulge lust and indulge any of our egos, instead of the Kundalini rising up the spinal column, it falls and it crystallizes and it strengthens and it empowers the Kunda buffer organ. This is the tail of Satan, the tail of demons, etc. And this is where our egos, this is the stronghold of our egos. You can meditate on your Kunda buffer organ. You can see it. If you meditate on it, you can feel it in meditation. You can see it. It is a real phenomena, and it represents our individual shaitan. If you want to read more about the Kunda buffer organ, you can read Samael and Bayor, but the real source or the most elaborate descriptions about the Kunda buffer organ that we've ever come across come from George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, G.I. Gurdjieff. Now you have to read. He wrote a lot, and like especially Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson is another massive book. But he goes on at length about the nature of the Kunda buffer organ and its dangers. Now, so that's Satan, right? Our Satan is our false self, and the Black Lodge inside of us, the tempter, the tempting serpent. Again, this coming back to that tempting serpent, right? So the risen Kundalini, and then the opposite of the risen Kundalini is the fallen Kundalini. So that's the virgin and the whore, right? The tail of Satan is the inverted Kundalini. So it's the fallen serpent. It's the tempting serpent. That's where our temptations come from our tail, from that which holds us down and points us towards our primal instinctive animal desires. And even worse than animal desires, because of course we are capable of doing things that some animals would never think of doing, would never dream of doing. We're in many ways worse than animals in that sense. So what of the Chariot? What is this Chariot? Why would that be significant that these two cards came up for D? And we were so pleased when she sent us a message today, and she gave us a little paragraph explaining what the Chariot was. And we'll just paraphrase. The Chariot is our solar bodies. The Chariot is the ark of the covenant, which we must build inside of ourselves. What is a chariot? A chariot is a vehicle. But a chariot is a vehicle of great power and force. A chariot is what kings and emperors ride in. It's also what warriors ride in, and well, athletes in chariot races, but warriors ride into battle. Mighty warriors will ride their chariot. Chariots are pulled by horses. A chariot is a vessel or an ark or a box in which the warrior king, the philosopher king, the warrior king rides into battle where the animals are under his control. They are obedient. They are noble steeds. The animals are noble because they are in service of this higher purpose. They're not just running around wild being animals, being primal animals and doing animal things. Now they're serving the king, the emperor, the warrior. If we use our imagination and we envision a noble warrior, a noble emperor king leading from the front, leading his army into battle against the heathens or whatever, barbarians or whatever, a chariot is that vessel that we can use to conquer our adversary. So what is this inside of us? Inside of us, this is our solar bodies. Our solar vital body, our solar astral body, our solar mental body, and our solar causal body. 4 bodies, 4 horses. But these horses, these animals, the lunar bodies that are risen and made noble, and these 4 horses form the 4 sides of a square, or the 4 sides of a box, the 4 sides of a vessel, or an ark. The Ark of the Covenant. What is a covenant? A covenant is a deal, a pact, which is made between 2 persons. But a covenant, as in the Ark of the Covenant, that pact, that deal, is made between God and man. These are the rules. This is the contract. That's what a covenant is, a contract that binds together the fates of 2 individuals. The Ark of the Covenant is, and when you consider this and work out this metaphor, like allow the metaphor to blossom, a chariot is a covenant between the rider, the driver, and the 4 horses. It is a contract. The 4 horses pull the chariot. The driver of the chariot has a covenant with his steeds, with his noble beasts. It all has to be harmonious. It's all a relationship, and it's all a harmonious relationship of working together in cooperation, in union, in unity, in fusion. Man, rider, and steed are one. You may have heard that expression in the past, where man and horse are one. It becomes a fusion of rider and horse, and it's this beautiful expression. It's the same thing with the chariot, but now it's a team of horses, 4 horses. If you think it's hard enough riding 1 horse, try to imagine what it's like driving a team of 4 horses, and not 2 horses, not 4 horses 2 and 2, but 4 horses side to side. So into an ark goes a covenant, which is the contract. The contract is between us and our innermost being. And the chariot, traditionally in ancient times, was always gilded, which means it was always gold or gold leafed, covered in gold leaf, or colored or painted gold. In other words, it was gilded. It was designed this way for a purpose. It had flourishes, it had feathers and other things on it, to represent that golden vessel, those golden vehicles that we need in order to traverse the supernal worlds. This is how we go into battle, armed with the weapons that are given to us by our Divine Mother, the spear and the shield, the javelin, our sword. These are the weapons that are provided to a warrior by his queen, by his Isis, by Athena, the weapons that Perseus receives from Athena. And these are the weapons that we receive from our Divine Mother. But we have to have the chariot, our golden solar bodies, with which we ride into battle and face the hordes, the legion of demons, the legions of adversaries, our Satan, our shaitan. So these solar bodies we create through transmutation of the sexual force. As a single person, we do this in pranayama, and there's another practice that's the sixth rite, the Vairoli mudra of the rites of rejuvenation. As a single person, we can do these practices to transmute the sexual force, pranayama and the Vairoli or Vajroli mudra, depending on how you want to pronounce it. You can get that practice from the rites of rejuvenation, which we can share in the chat if we can find the link in our bookmarks here. Okay. So it's the sixth rite of the rites of rejuvenation, the Vairoli mudra. As a couple, though, we practice white tantra. For some reason, it's not letting me put the links into Facebook, or maybe it did. I don't know. It's strange. If anybody's watching on Facebook, you'll have to let me know if the links are showing up. If not, I'll put them on the screen instead. So this is how we create the solar bodies. We have to take the energy, which right now is trapped in the Kunda buffer organ and has crystallized lunar bodies. That means our physical body, our vital body, our astral body, our mental body, and our causal body are overrun with egos. Okay, so Ryu, does that mean you got the link in on Facebook? It says we got Sacred Rites for Rejuvenation there on screen. Okay, all right. My streaming software said there was an error, but okay, so that's good. What we need to do is transmute the sexual force from being lunar, from being trapped inside of the egos and being trapped inside the Kunda buffer organ, being trapped inside of lust, and transmute it so that it can create for us the solar bodies, the chariot. And this is how we battle our shaitan. We weaken our individual Satan, and we strengthen our innermost being, our true self. through this process. And our vital body, our mental body, astral body, and causal body, the four horses, our four bodies, the four steeds, the four aspects of our animal self become aligned and become ennobled. They're raised up. They're not these wild things running all over hell's half acre, reacting egotistically like animals, reacting with like primal instinctive reactions to everything, like the ego does. Instead, we rein them in. We rein in our lunar bodies, our ourselves. And this is how another way in which we can comprehend what Carl Jung talks about when he talks about the integration of the shadow self. If we comprehend the mythological creatures known as the centaur, or any of the half man, half beast creatures like mermaids and centaur, where with the upper half of the body is human and the lower half is an animal, is a goat or a deer or some other animal or a horse, we recognize that we want to be a true human being means to integrate these animal aspects of ourselves so that they are in service to us. So we rein in our wild horses and build the chariot, and we hook up those horses to our chariot and we tame them. And in the process, we are raising up the sexual force up the spinal column in white tantra or in pranayama. But we are going to battle with that chariot and with those horses against the adversary. And the adversary is our many egos: fear, lust, greed, envy, anger, gluttony, laziness, and all their many, many forms. This is the battle. This is World War III. It is the war against the ego. It is the war that we fight inside. And everything you see outside is an expression of that war. Now, if you've ever seen any realistic depiction of war, whether it's the Battle of Waterloo, the movie Waterloo, whether it's The Longest Day, Saving Private Ryan, the opening scene from Gladiator, the scenes from Lawrence of Arabia, you know that there is much confusion on the battlefield. It's chaos. It's confusion. It's, forces getting scattered all over the place. And so what's happening inside of our psyche is we're being pulled in all of these different directions. And this confusion is happening all around us in the world in order that the confusion be that way in our mind and in our hearts and in our body. So that we are torn, we are divided and conquered. We are set against ourselves, as it were. And when you really observe yourself, you realize that what's setting you, it's like somebody going into a stables and setting off firecrackers. Now, what do you suppose that's going to do to the horses in the stables? Those horses, which under normal circumstances are, quite tame. They're okay. They're but if you go and you set off firecrackers or you light the stable on fire, the horses are going to go nuts. They're going to go ballistic. They're going to go crazy. That's exactly what's happening in the world today. We are surrounded. We are made to live in a land of confusion, in an age of confusion, in order to tear us apart, to tear families apart, but to tear psyches apart. And in a knee-jerk reaction to being torn apart psychologically, what do? We immediately seek some form of balm, some sort of bandage to repair this feeling of being torn in two. So what do? We identify, but that identification is outside of us, to this tribe, to that group, to such and such political party, to this belief system, to this conspiracy theory, to this anger group, to this reactionary group. So that when we identify now with this tribe or that tribe, why? Because we've been torn asunder. We've been confused. Whatever fusion, whatever connection we had to our innermost, but now a piece of us, a part of us, through fear, through some ego, has been ripped away from that fusion. And now that free radical, that aspect of our psyche, that consciousness that's been torn away from being whole and one and centered with ourself, now it's freaking out. So it's going to find something to clap onto. And it does. And the Black Lodge is giving us all sorts of things to identify with and to put our faith and trust in and to identify with. So how many people have gotten the old jab in the arm? How many people have put their faith and trust in governments? How many people have put their faith and trust in the World Health Organization? How many people have put their faith and trust in materialist science and the pharmaceutical companies? The system as it is, right? Why? For no reason whatsoever other than fear, because they were bombarded with these lies and these messaging, this propaganda about this deadly pandemic ravaging the world. When you look at the numbers, it's no worse than a typical or a bad flu season. But the fear rips when identified with the fear, identified with the story that's being told, the narrative that's being presented, and someone buys into it and identifies with it. They become confused, split, divided, and conquered. And instead of looking within, instead of doing what we did, which is way back 2018, there's 2019, no, late 2018, when this first signs of this whole thing started showing up, we went into meditation. We meditated on what is actually the nature of viruses, and the coronavirus in particular. And we were revealed as to the nature of exosomes and their communicative ability, and that it's not actually that exosomes are ways for cells to communicate with one another about environmental dangers. And we had never heard the term exosome before. We had never come across exosome before, ever. And it was only after meditation that all of this was revealed to us, that we went onto the internet and we discovered that not only are exosomes well known to biologists, but they admit in their own words that it's very, very hard for them to tell the difference between a so-called virus and an exosome. In fact, there was a paper that we read from Johns Hopkins University that said most of the time we can't tell the difference. And all this stuff about, viruses and DNA sequences and RNA sequences and spike proteins and all this stuff is all, there's no doubt that exosomes have been engineered and reverse engineered to cause symptoms. But what's really going on there? All that's happening is that you're taking and re-engineering an exosome, which is designed to communicate danger in the body, to communicate to other cells of environmental dangers. So basically, you're just, what you're doing is you're able to take an exosome, and if you inject it into somebody else, then you're able to mimic the symptoms that that person would experience had they been exposed to the same environmental toxicity. This is what they call, disease, this is what they call virility. This is what they call viral infection. But the only real viruses that exist like that are phages or bacterial phages, and they affect bacteria only. Everything else is an exosome. And so but what they're doing now with this jab is very, 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 very different. The fact that they're justifying this injection with that story, and so many people buy into it. Why? Because they want to be able to travel. They want to be good little children. They want to get their passport stamped. They want to be able to travel. They don't want their comfort and security upset. They want to go things back to normal. And do you remember when the story first broke back in early 2019? Remember how they kept repeating over and over and over again the statement, the new normal? The new normal, the new normal, the new normal. This is the new normal. This is the new normal. This is the new normal. People who don't like change, people who are afraid of change, didn't hear the words new. They only heard the word normal, because the mind is the adversary while it is under control of the ego. And most people, when they watch television, they are asleep. They're not awake while they watch TV. Their mind is wandering. They're thinking about, they're just being programmed. So they heard the word, this is normal. They didn't hear the word new. They filtered that out. Because the subjective mind, the ego mind, has the ability to do that. They heard, this is normal, this is normal, this is normal, this is normal. And if you speak to those people today who got this in the arm, they'll tell you. In fact, they'll tell you you're abnormal if you didn't get it. They'll tell you you are abnormal. There's something wrong with you. Let us not be too judgmental, however. Let us have compassion, and let us recognize that those people are all suffering. Those people are all asleep. They've been hypnotized. They've been duped. And not by the governments and the media and the propaganda. No, by their own ego mind. The seat of power of the Black Lodge in this humanity is in the mind. That's why the Buddhists and the Zen Buddhists are so adamant about getting out of the mind and meditating and not thinking. The Gnostics also. it's a very fine line, and it's a very dangerous subtlety to express to people, but we express it to you because we have faith that the mind is a very powerful tool in the hands of the being. Heart mind is what the Buddhists would say, Zen Buddhists in particular would talk about heart mind, union of heart mind. For years we focused on the heart, just like Gnostics do, like the doctrine of the heart. There's the doctrine of the eye, which relates to the physical eye, but it also relates to the eye of the ego, which is all the theories and all the perceptions and all the opinions that we take in, we formulate. This is the world of the sophists from Platonic philosophical point of view. And then there's the doctrine of the heart, which is the doctrine of gnosis. But we, in our own experience, given our own nature and given our purpose here, for example, now, to rely solely on intuition and to rely solely on that faculty would hamstring us in our work. So ejecting ego from the mind and wrestling the mind back under control of the being creates this space of heart mind, where the mind becomes a blank slate. And this is what meditation and self-observation and self-remembering are all about. Learning to bring the mind back down to a calm mountain lake. What comes to mind is that beautiful scene from Forrest Gump, where he's jogging or he's running by that mountain lake, and he describes it where he says, you can't tell where heaven began, where earth stopped and heaven began, or something to that effect. So when you calm the wind, wind is mind, air, wind in the Chinese mysticism. Air is mind. So the wind blows the water and creates waves. When you have waves on the water, you have ripples on the water, you can't see much of anything on the water. But when you can stop thinking, when you can calm the air, calm the wind, so it stops blowing, then the water settles and produces this beautiful, perfect mirror on the surface of the water. That mirror can reflect the heavens. And this is what heart mind can do. When the mind is able to reflect, because it can receive and reflect that which is projected onto it. And what is projected onto it comes from above, comes from heaven. This is a mind which we have reined in. Right? It's not running over hell's half acre, a wild stallion. It's now an ennoble mind. And we can ride this mind. This mind can be one of the 4 steeds of our chariot and one of the 4 walls of our ark, of the box of the covenant between us and God, our higher self, our true self, which is our innermost God, our innermost guru, our innermost being. and the contract that we have with him, the fusion, the covenant, the contract, the license, the marriage license to be married, to be fused, to be one, to have yug, to have religare. So this chariot that we have, these solar bodies, which we create by transmuting the sexual force and pranayama and white tantra, we use these to conquer our egos. And that process is what we've talked to, we've shared in the past. We call it the Aum of Life. 7 steps: mindfulness, diagnosis, analysis and meditation, synthesis, catharsis, liberation, and gnosis. We've shared this many times. It's the process of observing ourselves in the intellectual, emotional, and motor instinctive sexual centers, the 3 brains that we've talked about, diagnosing those egos behind our suffering. So we say in the moment, okay, there's fear, there's anger, there's lust, there's greed, there's gluttony. Oh, there's my gluttony. There's, then going into meditation later and doing a retrospection using visualization and exposition, exposing the nature of those egos using meditation. And we use retrospection and visualization, but this is not a process of thinking. This is a process of replaying the events of the day, replaying the events of that particular circumstance, that scenario where the ego was playing a role, was causing us to react or act and or react through its filter. And we want to analyze how it was causing us and others suffering. And we want to meditate on that until we achieve a state of comprehension or synthesis. Again, fusion. Synthesis suggests fusion, where it all comes together and then bang, we have this moment of clarity. We go, and it's just like that. After we have achieved synthesis or comprehension of that ego, and it's not an understanding, it's not a mental thing. This is synthesis takes place in the consciousness. We have a conscious clarity and awakening, a eureka moment. It's like the Buddhists describe it as a flash of lightning in the dark of night. It's a little, it can be even a samadhi, but it doesn't have to be a full-blown samadhi, but it's the same, it has the same characteristics, only it can be much more subtle than that. But when you experience comprehension, when you experience synthesis, you will know it. It's a eureka moment. It's not like getting the answer or being told the answer or believing you know the answer. It's knowing you know. It has a unique, distinct flavor. And it may take many years of meditating on an ego for you to achieve synthesis. So it's not something that you should expect, and it is not something that you should believe will come quickly or easily. The next 2 steps are really in the hands of your Divine Mother. But this is why we need to work with her intelligently, transmuting the sexual force. If we're single, we do pranayama. If we're a couple, we do white tantra, because by raising the sexual force, out of the Kunda buffer organ, out of the root chakra, up the spinal column, over the crown chakra to the third eye, and then into the heart. We create our solar bodies, and we strengthen our capacity. We strengthen our chariot, and our Divine Mother can eliminate from us any ego which we have previously comprehended. So, but if we are spilling the seed, if we are spilling or wasting our sexual force, if we are indulging, you cannot eliminate an ego that you are strengthening. And you cannot eliminate the ego with the sexual force if you are channeling that sexual force into and through that ego. Makes sense, right? You cannot, even if you comprehend that ego, you can fall back into that ego. You can fall back into error. It's your Divine Mother. You cannot dissolve an ego if you are strengthening it at the same time. Cannot happen. And that's why white tantra is so important. That's why ethical behavior is so important. And that's why willpower and observing a certain amount of self-discipline is important. Now, unfortunately, because we're stubborn and because we're so overwrought with ego, we have to repeat the same mistake often over and over and over and over again before we finally learn our lesson. And this means that those egos are very, very, very strongly entrenched in us. But this should not in any way detract or discourage us from doing the work. We should just be calm and relaxed about this process and recognize that nothing happens before it's time. So we may have to live with a certain ego for a long, long time before we have paid sufficient karma, suffered sufficiently from that ego before we can comprehend and have it eliminated from us. This is a process that is managed by our Divine Mother, by the Lords of Karma. We can do our part, and we should do our part to always observe ourselves, because certainly it's not going to happen automatically. It won't. This process will not happen without our cooperation. In other words, it doesn't mean that our actions drive this process. We have to recognize that we don't have a say, for instance, on whether or not our Divine Mother is going to eliminate this ego or not. We can request it. We can go through a process of putting the ego on trial. And this is a process which is described in a number of books, or just Revolutionary Psychology. We're not even sure which book exactly. Master Samael talks about it in one of his books. I think it's Revolution of the Dialectic. We can put our ego on trial. After we have achieved synthesis, after we have achieved comprehension, we can take that ego and put it on trial. And we've all seen trial dramas. We've all seen courtroom dramas. We all know what a courtroom looks like. We know where the jury sits, we know where the judge sits, and we know where the defendant sits. All we have to do is take the ego, using our imagination in meditation, and we put the ego in the defendant box. Then we take the role of the prosecuting attorney, and we put our Divine Mother in the seat of judge. And the lords of karma, Anubis and the lords of karma, well, actually, we can have Lord Anubis as the judge and the lords of karma in the jury box. And we plead our case. We state what the ego is, and we state for the jury and the court that what we know about that ego, in other words, the knowledge, the gnosis, which came to us in synthesis and comprehension. And we can pray and visualize and basically say, we condemn this ego condemn this ego for causing us and others suffering in these ways. And then basically we ask the court to pass sentence on the ego. And then we call our Divine Mother to appear, and with her sword, with her flaming sword, she stabs us, not the ego, but us, in our mind, in our heart, and in our sexual organs, in our spine, and the base of our spine, our sexual organs, which is the center of our motor instinctive sexual center. And each time she does that, we pronounce mentally the mantra Krim, which is we have to roll the R. I can't roll my R, so I can't do it the way it's supposed to be done, but it's Kri, it's Kri. You roll your R and it's Krim. Krim. Stabbed in the mind, in the heart, and in the sex with the flaming sword. And we can visualize our whole body going up in flames and incinerating that ego from us. And we can do this as part of our meditation after synthesis. And if the karma is good, and our we may have to do this several times, but if we have been transmuting the sexual force, we can help expedite the process of catharsis, of annihilation of the comprehended ego. This is something that we don't include typically when we talk about the Alm of Life, because the Alm of Life, we prepared for to be able to share with people on a relatively secular level as well. And this whole Anubis and the Lords of Karma and Divine Mother and flaming swords and all this kind of stuff is a little bit too esoteric for the masses. But we share it with you here now. And again, the last two, liberation and gnosis, are really afterthoughts. The consciousness which is freed from the annihilation of the ego, and the gnosis, the experiential, the growth that we achieve from this whole process, just feeds as a positive feedback loop, goes back into our continued work for observation of ourself and self-remembering, and work on the next ego that we're going to be encountering in meditation. Encountering first in our life, and then analyzing in meditation. So it's a 7-step process, yes, but really it's 5 steps. And it's really 4 steps that we practice. 5 steps if we want to include the last component that we describe. The other 2 take care of themselves. But having said that, once you have the gnosis, once you have the knowledge of the ego, it doesn't mean that your work is over, right? You go on to the next ego, or you go into the next version of that ego, because we have many, many, many egos. It's not just one ego we're talking about. We're talking about specific egos: fear, anger, greed, lust, envy, etc. And these egos can have multiple copies of themselves and affect us in different ways, different aspects of our life. So the other thing is, if you read Revolutionary Psychology, Master Samael describes how we have to comprehend our egos on each of 49 levels of the mind, 7 times 7 levels. So in order to be fully free of our egos, this is a process which we have to repeat many, many, many times. And we will have to encounter the same ego on different levels as we progress. We will these egos will keep returning and haunting us in different ways. And so we have to, the Aum of life is a spiral, right? And so each time you have to, like, each time you go on a revolution of the hero's journey, you have to descend into hell and then return. And each time you defeat the demon or the dragon and recover some treasure, or to use the old fairy tale analogy, you awaken the maiden who's been put asleep. That the maiden is psyche, our psychology, our psyche, our soul is feminine. So if you go around and around and around, each time you go deeper down into the dungeon, but you come higher up with more gnosis. And then you go deeper into the dungeon and come up with more gnosis. And this is the process of growth, of spiritual development. And each time we are facing the adversary, which is the Black Lodge, which is in here. And then, when we have done this process sufficient amount of time, for a sufficient amount of time, for a sufficient number of years, and we're talking years, then we can face the world in all its confusion, in all its chaos, and we can be without fear. We can be without desire, without lust, without envy, without anger, without hate. We can be like Luke Skywalker, facing the Emperor, facing the destruction of the rebellion, facing imminent death, and we can be calm and relaxed and say, no, I will not give in to anger. I will not give in to hate, for they are the dark side. And this then is the key to living in a land of confusion, living in an age of confusion, an age of suffering, an age of chaos and cataclysm. There is a theory, one of many, that the global elite, in their fear, in their desperate attempt to control outcomes, because as we described in a previous video, the desire for control is just fear. It's been theorized that the jab is a massive depopulation strategy. It's a tool of depopulation. Depopulate the planet. That theory on the surface sounds good, and it may even be on the surface what those global elite believe they're doing. But as we described in our video about fear, the video that we were talking about, the Face Your World's Fear, the reality is that if there is a massive depopulation which results from this whole pandemic situation and the whole injection situation, that depopulation will be a great mercy. It will have proven to be a process of euthanization. Now, why do we say that? Because what the world is facing now is nothing compared with what's coming. the confusion and the chaos that we're facing today as the forces of mechanical nature dismantle, undermine, and deconstruct humanity on the metaphysical level is peanuts compared to the destruction of a humanity on the physical level. And when the great cataclysms come that destroy the cities and destroy this humanity and wipe it from the face of the earth, those who live in fear, those who are possessed by fear, will not be able to endure that level of confusion, that level of chaos. They will go mad. They will go crazy. They will go mad. They will absolutely lose their minds. So to prevent that from happening and prevent that kind of suffering and what would inevitably result from 6.5 billion people losing their minds, collectively losing their minds in the wake of facing death itself, and all those people who aren't ready, who haven't prepared themselves for death, who are completely gripped by fear. And we know they're gripped by fear. Why? Because they got the jab. They were terrified of not getting the jab. They're terrified of the pandemic. They were terrified of what they're being told. They were terrified of the illusion. They were seeing ghosts in the closet. It was a test. Remember, the Black Lodge, their divinely ordained purpose is to test us and tempt us and cause us to fall. Yes, but tempt us and test us. We need to be tested. How do you know what you're really capable of unless you are tested? And all those who failed the test got this in the arm. So, before the great cataclysm comes, whatever trigger is going to trigger that thing, they will get ill, and either they will become like zombies, like The Walking Dead. We're either looking at a mass anesthesia program or a mass euthanization program, so that those people who are not ready to face the end of a humanity, the end of the Kali Yuga, they will somehow be taken out of the equation. Either they will be so hypnotized, so dumbed down that they will not have to face it, or they will not believe it's happening, or they will something, or they will be outright just gone. They will just pass away, or they will slip into a coma, whatever the case may be. But remember, the Black Lodge ultimately works for the White Lodge. So it may seem ironic, right, that we began this live stream talking about the confusion and the Black Lodge and how it's all designed to make us fall and everything else. Well, that's all true. But they also work for mechanical nature, and they also work for the White Lodge. And in the Kali Yuga, about the destruction of a humanity, remember, love is severity and mercy. It's both. So even amidst all this confusion and corruption and chaos, there is still purpose to it. And there is mercy involved, and we do strongly feel that even though on the surface, the global elite, the global cabal behind the whole pandemic nonsense might believe in their mind that they're doing it for depopulation, eugenics goal of reducing the population of the world to 500 million, like it's inscribed on the Georgia Guidestones. Are they, though? Or are they just doing what they're told? They're masters, the masters of the Black Lodge. And have the masters of the Black Lodge that are completely in control of their minds. Those people are totally and completely hypnotized. They're completely bought into. They have pledged their allegiance to their own individual Satan long ago. These people are without conscience. So they can't be trusted with the truth. It's the reason why they spew lies all the time, because they live a lie. They can't be trusted with the truth. It's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard message to hear, perhaps. But love is severity and mercy in equal measure. And both the White Lodge and the Black Lodge emanate from the same place. Archons and the Aeons. The Archons are there serving a very important purpose for the Aeons. And it's, like we said, it's a chess game. Adversaries, but not enemies. It's a tough one. It's hard to swallow. And certainly there are very fervent believers on the side of the light who speak with great vehemence toward the dark. And rightly so, because the dark's game is to twist, tempt, and corrupt and trick us. So we can't afford to be naive. On the game board, on playing the game, the black pieces are there to take the white pieces. It's just the way it is. But what's behind the black pieces and what's behind the white pieces are two people playing a game, are two entities playing a game. And at the end of the Kali Yuga, it's time to reset the board. And there's a process that goes through that, and that process is ultimately, it is managed by love, and it's tough love, no doubt, but tough love is still love. And there is mercy in it. There is mercy in it, in all the death, and all the destruction, in all the confusion, and all the chaos, because, as we point out, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And if you can learn to find that place of peace within yourself and get your 4 horses and your chariot in order and go into battle against the Black Lodge within, then you can face anything that this Kali Yuga has to throw at us. And you can be like this fellow in this image. Be calm and cool, relaxed, and at the ready, in the eye of the storm, and not distracted and not confused. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Just a note, we will not be having a live stream on Friday. We have a personal matter to attend to, family engagement, which we cannot avoid. So we will have no live stream on Friday. If anything changes, we might shift it to a noon hour stream on Friday, but we'll let you know tomorrow if that's the case. Otherwise, if you don't hear from us, if you don't see a notification, we'll have no live stream on Friday. Thank you all for joining us. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time to ask. Otherwise, we'll sign off and bid you all a good evening and a good weekend, and we'll see you all again next week. So again, thank you all. We don't see any questions. So thank you all. And by all means, we hope this was helpful. And we hope to see you again next time.